12:05 in the afternoon here on 90.3 FM. It's Wednesday. That means it's Joe Steckler Day, helping seniors of Brevard. And here's the host of our show, Joe Steckler. Hi, Joe.
Welcome, John. Thank you, John. You know, folks, you can't see what's happening in the studio, but right before when John was playing that jiving music, I got like 4 dancing bears in the studio, 2 on one side of the glass and 2 on the other side of the glass. And it's just a shame that we can't record this. And we had talked one time about putting cameras in the TV studio or in the radio studio so that we could actually record this as live TV.
Well, it's good music, isn't it? It's good music.
It is good music. And it's, when you get 4 dancing bears like this, that's good entertainment, too. But the other part of the show, folks, and the reason I laugh at some of this, John has talked to me over the years about what it really means to be on talk radio and why talk radio is so important to people understanding what's happening and how much news is really disseminated on talking radio over the years. And I think of all the things I've been involved with John on radio, and then we started a special a special Monday show, and it had to do with legislation and what was happening politically. And after a while, it just consumed me. It burned me up because I saw so many failures of us to help the public really truly understand what was happening. So I resolved when I stopped doing that show to figure out some other way to bring to the public what some of the information they needed to have. So we got back on the air with this radio show on 90.3, and we're going to just keep trying to improve what we do, and we improve all of our media outlets, my newspaper columns, and trying to get some of our people that we had years ago writing, like my panelist this morning, who was Bill Johnson. Bill Johnson is an elder law attorney, and Bill just showed me the news where he had just been nominated for and elected to be the secretary of the Florida Bar Association that deals with elder law. And Bill, perhaps you could tell our people just a little bit more about what that means, not only to you, but to having somebody like that in our own hometown of Brevard.
Well, it helps us get a voice in the elder law field, and it also helps us disseminate information that is coming from the statewide organizations out to our local attorneys and constituents. So it helps us, get the word out about things that are coming down the pike, and helps us also, having a voice in what happens in Tallahassee.
Okay. I sent a note over to Bill's office yesterday, folks, and just to make sure, I always check to make sure my panelists are going to be here on the radio show, because things can happen in the last minute to keep it from being here. But they assured me Bill would be here, and that Bill would send me some information on what he wanted to talk about. Well, when I got the thing that Bill wanted to talk about, he wanted to talk about what's happening in Tallahassee regarding elders and some of the facts of law that just might be important to elders. And I had no idea what Bill wanted to talk about. So this is one of the first time I've ever done a radio show that I don't have one-liners in front of me to fall back on. But I don't think Bill doesn't know this, that I do also get a news thing that comes from the Florida legislature from a guy named Bob Best. Is that what you get your information from?
No, I get it from a different source.
Okay, so then what we're going to talk about this morning, we're going to get 2 takes on what's happening in Tallahassee. But ironically, the 2 takes in so many cases are going to fall back to one position about what you all need to know. And I think that you're going to find out this morning, folks, that you might want to have a pencil and paper with you there, And if you want to call us this morning and ask a question about what Bill and I are going to talk about, the phone number here is 722-9998. I'll say it again, 722-9998. And so please listen to what we're going to talk about, and you might want to talk to some of your friends, because some of these things, it's not too late, not at all, for you to call your legislator and say, I don't like what's happening, or I do like what's happening, and I fully support it. But you can also say, and I think after you hear what Bill and I are going to talk about, you might want to say, hey, get off your so-called rear end and do something about changing some of this legislation to help people. So, but my panelist this morning, folks, is Bill Johnson, and Bill is an elder law attorney, and I've worked with Bill for up to 19 years, and with radio, TV, and getting his columns in for our newsletter and everything. So I know what he does to help seniors, and that's really important, because there are a lot of attorneys out there, folks, and when I need an attorney referral, I call Bill's office and get Bill, because there's so many questions that come into helping seniors that involve other aspects of the law. And if you really want to get the type of lawyer you really need for what your particular area of concern is, you need to get the right person. And I hope Bill will talk about that just a little bit this morning. But having said all that, welcome, Bill, and why don't you go ahead and start with what you want to talk about on legislation.
Well, I was going to run down some of the bills that affect seniors and talk about where they're at and what's going on, and kind of that kind of thing with, what's going on in Tallahassee. And so I went through a list of bills that deal with seniors, and there's a whole variety, a smorgasbord, if you will, of bills that affect seniors. We have Senate Bill 60, and that deals with making the purchase of adult diapers and incontinence products tax exempt. So that one looks like it's going to go through. Nobody's opposing that. One of the bigger bills, Senate Bill 184, is going to take the regulation of hospices, assisted living facilities, adult family homes, and adult daycare centers and move it from the Department of Elder Affairs over to the Agency for Healthcare Administration.
Wait, say that again. You're going to do what now?
So hospices, assisted living facilities, adult family homes, and adult daycare centers are not going to be regulated under the Department of Elder Affairs anymore. They will be regulated under the Agency for Healthcare Administration. And that's always been a little bit of a problem, because those two agencies have always tried to figure out who has jurisdiction. And whenever you have a problem, they point at each other and say, you need to go talk to them, not us. And so now it's all going to be under one roof.
Do you think it is a good move to move it from the Department of Elder Affairs over to the Department of Children and Families?
I really do not know the answer to that. I've heard some people think that this may be a step towards letting these different organizations self-regulate, but I've only heard that once, so I don't know if that is what's happening. But on its face, I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
Well, what about the fact that over the years, when the two agencies threw stones at each other, generally that stone resulted in the fact that the Department of Elder Affairs might say to the Department of Children and Families, this is your area of responsibility, and we're talking about watching to make sure that there weren't scams and different things like that. But a concern I would have, Bill, would be the fact that the Department of Children and Families is already overworked.
Well, it's actually transferring it to the Agency for Healthcare Administration.
Okay, Agency for Healthcare Administration.
Right, which is the one who currently regulates nursing homes, hospitals, doctors' offices.
Okay, I said Department of Children and Families. Okay, I take it back.
So, and then we have House Bill 253, and there's a companion Senate bill. What they want to do here is organize a task force to come up with low-cost assisted living facilities for seniors. There is, as you know, Joe, assisted living facilities currently run about $3,600 a month just for room and board.
Yep.
And then you can tack on anywhere from $0 to another $2,000, depending on how much care you need. And most people can't afford that. So they are forming a task force with a bunch of different healthcare professionals and developers and things like that to come up with alternatives for low-cost assisted living facilities and find out what some of the options on how the state can come up with, alternatives.
It's interesting that we have a bill like that before the legislators because several weeks ago, a couple months now, I had a developer call me as a result of reading one of my articles in the newspaper in Hometown News, and offered to help with the development of low-income housing for Brevard County, and I referred him to a certain person that ran one of those agencies here locally. To date, I have not heard one blessed thing about it, so I'll just make it a note to myself to check on what's happening on that, because that was what the guy was proposing made sense. He's done it in Pennsylvania and a couple of other states. And if it works in other states, Bill, it might be a good chance it would work in Florida.
Right. I agree.
Okay.
We have House Bill 305, which is interesting because it allows, most people are probably familiar with the Amber Alerts and Silver Alert system.
Right.
But did you know that only applies to motor vehicles? That when a senior, is driving or a child's been abducted in a car, they can broadcast that. But it does not apply to other kinds of missing persons. And this would allow it to apply if somebody had eloped from a, secured facility, that they could use this system to broadcast, so to speak, the information about the person who's missing on that system.
And I can think of several situations that I have been involved with over the years when that would have made a true difference in what happened to one situation where a person they had misdiagnosed him with Alzheimer's. He got away from the family, ended up in Mexico, and we had to work with the State Department to get the man back. We never got his car back, a new, I think it was a new Mustang. Never got that back, but we got the man back. But it took several weeks to do it, and a lot of agony to the wife. And I was personally involved in that, so I know what can happen if you don't have legislation that covers this type of thing. So I think that's a good one.
And then we have House Bill 409, and this is interesting, that you can now sign legal documents, or proposing right now, that you would be able to sign legal documents online. So if I was wanting to sign, say, a will, I could sit in front of a computer. The witnesses could appear via cameras, that Skype technology. And the notary could also appear via that. And I could actually sign my will. It would all be recorded. And then they can witness via electronic means. And so I could basically, if I was in my house by myself, execute a will without having to bring everybody to the house.
You think that's good or not?
Well, we had to put a lot of safeguards in that one, and the elder law section was very involved with that because, we want to make sure, one, that when we're signing like powers of attorney or wills, that, there is nobody in the room with the person twisting their arm. We also got to make sure that the person has capacity to execute these documents. So there is a laundry list of questions that the person who's going to execute has to respond to ensure that they, and this all gets recorded, that they have capacity, that they're not having their arm twisted or a gun held to their head to do this. Because, you could see a lot of circumstances where there would be open to exploitation or abuse. So there's a lot of safeguards. This is the third year this bill has come up.
I know.
And so this year we worked very heavily with them in putting certain safeguards in so that they would have a bill that would pass.
Are you saying that the National Association of Elder Law Attorneys actually was working with this?
Well, the elder law section of the Florida Bar.
Elder law section of the Florida Bar. So there were elder law attorneys involved in the development of the legislation.
And correct. And part of the view is we firmly believe that everybody should have have an opportunity to have an estate plan. Having a will or having these documents probably outweighs the circumstances where somebody might be getting abused or exploited.
Okay.
The benefit, if we put these safeguards in there, is better than the potential for abuse.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. We also have Senate Bill 454. This is a creation of a fatality review team. Would you believe that Florida currently doesn't track deaths in nursing homes and causes? These are individually, I guess the police or whomever goes out and individually looks at, the circumstance surrounding somebody's death if there is a suspicious activity. But there's no tracking of these items, and there has been quite a bit of press lately given to the fact that some people are saying in the press that the Agency for Healthcare Administration is not regulating these facilities like it should. And in the articles, I've read a couple of them, they cite a whole slew of people who had died from, basically neglect in a nursing home or didn't get the proper medical care. And then, in turn, the Agency for Healthcare Administration didn't even find the facility. So
who actually is responsible now for the development of the bills or tracking of the bills?
Well, they're going to create a task force to do that.
Okay,
yes.
But Bill, you and I both know, and we've read several. They've been written up publicly in Florida today, with lists of abuses in certain facilities. And are you saying that nobody ever goes after that?
Very rarely do they fine or revoke a license or suspend a license.
That's awful.
Yes, and there was actually, I think, a write-up in our local Florida Today about that as well.
I know. It's the reason I keep pushing on it. Mm-hmm. But it's a business of knowing that something is wrong and having the capability to correct it, but not developing the capacity to correct it. I think that's a poor statement on the part of legislators.
Well, we obviously need to do a better job of that.
I think so.
Otherwise, if there is no stick, what is there to change behaviors?
So what you're saying here, that bill would give local law enforcement the power they need to go after these nursing homes?
What that bill would do is give us information such that we could begin tracking these deaths and thus, create an information, find out what kind of problem we have on our hands.
Okay. All right.
That's the start.
All right.
We had House Bill 677, which was the Guardianship and Protective Proceedings Jurisdiction Act. That was actually a bill that the Elder Law section proposed. We had a companion bill in the Senate. Part of the problem with this bill, or what we ran into, was that we had another section of the bar, the real property probate and trust law section, who didn't necessarily agree with us. And so we went back and forth trying to get this bill massaged to a point where we could get it passed this session. We reached a deadlock on it, and subsequently we're not pursuing this year. We'll probably work on it over the summer and see if we can get it into shape to propose at the next legislative session.
What was that one again now?
That was the Florida Guardianship and Protective Proceedings Jurisdiction Act. And this bill was proposed because if you have somebody under a guardianship in Florida and you want to transfer them to another state, we want that state to recognize the Florida guardian.
Okay.
And vice versa. The other states then are also going to expect when they have a guardianship that transfers to Florida that we will recognize it. And part of the problem with that is people think our safeguards on guardianships are much better than other states' safeguards, and they weren't willing necessarily to adopt or recognize states transferring in. It has become a real problem because you can imagine Florida has a ton of guardianship cases that move back and forth between states like New Jersey and New York. I've had a couple go to Connecticut and Oregon where the judges in those states, because Florida has not adopted this act, refuse to recognize the Florida guardian, which means then if you're in litigation, you got to relitigate the whole case, which creates a huge mess. So this is
a lot of additional expense.
Yes, a lot of additional expense. So that's why we were seeking to get this pushed through. There is, like I said, there was some resistance, so we're going to try and reach some sort of compromise over the summer and reintroduce this. Florida is one of 3 states in the country that has not adopted the Uniform Guardianship Jurisdiction Act.
I don't understand why a guardianship enacted in one state would not be supported. I just don't understand that because I just don't think that, or I find it difficult to believe that the legal authorities in one state would not recognize what the legal authorities done in another state, especially in the case of a guardianship. That's not something that any state takes lightly.
Correct.
And so this to me is one of those pieces of legislation that we have to work on that we should not have to spend a lot of time on it because it should be something that people will be able to understand better.
I agree. I totally agree.
All right.
We had some legislation about Senate Bill 1338. This deals with where you would have the venue for a guardianship of a minor. Believe it or not, we didn't, venue is a legal term.
Right.
Jurisdiction is whether or not you're in county court or circuit court. Venue is which circuit court or which county court. Okay. That's the difference. And we didn't have a statute on that, so we now are proposing one that should pass.
How do you guys find so many things that you differ on over the years, and these things have been going on for years? I don't understand why.
Well, usually
Joe,
usually what happens is some of these get litigated, and then the problem pops up, and then we fix the problem through the legislative process. A good example of that, I don't have the numbers, is there was a case called the Rothman case, which involved an examining committee, and our current statute says if 2 of the 3 examining committee members in a guardianship go out and visit with somebody and say the person's got capacity, the guardianship automatically is terminated. And this would allow a judge to actually have a hearing and bring in some extrinsic evidence from other medical professionals. So that would be a fix to that particular court case.
Gee, I'm amazed at so many things. And, not one time did you mention the differences between the differences between the House and the Senate budget. Did you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yep.
So that doesn't make sense, does it?
Yep.
Okay, folks, we're going to reach our mid-show break, and stay with us because Bill hasn't even talked about some of the things that I want to talk about, and I thought he would talk about. So we're going to get into that on the other side of the show and see if what his take is on some of this stuff. So stay with us.
12:34 in the afternoon here on 90.3 FM. It's Helping Seniors of Brevard with your host, Joe Steckler, and his special guest, Attorney Bill Johnson. Joe?
Thank you, John. Folks, before Bill and I go back into talking about what's happening in the legislative session, I'd just like to remind everybody that we're broadcasting from 90.3 FM, and our phone number here is 722-9998 if you have a question. And I encourage you to think about this is a Talk to Me network, and when we have a host like Bill on, and we're talking about the types of things we're talking about today, you can call us and ask a question, because I know a lot of people do have questions. I have a lot of examples of how the changes in legislation will affect elderly, but I also would remind people that we have a lot of sponsors for our show. Bill's one of the sponsors, but Dr. Lee Sheldon is another sponsor. The Eye Institute is a sponsor. We have a whole host of sponsors, and you can find out who our sponsors are, what we do, how these sponsors help make our show and what we do possible. And you can go to our website, helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. helpingseniorsofbrevard, all one word, .org. And you can find out about what we do, and you can find out about how we try to support ourselves. And with the changes that are happening in Tallahassee, the changes that are happening on a national level, and the changes that are happening here on a local level, it's going to become more important for our local citizens to recognize a need to support nonprofits. I had a lady from New York call me the other day and ask about services at the senior centers. And she said, I just don't understand why you don't have the same thing here that we have in New York. In New York, I could go to a senior center in the morning, and for $2, I would get my breakfast. I would play games all day. I'd get my lunch, and it all cost me $2. And I go down here, I can't find any senior center that does anything like that. I said, man, that's New York. I said, we're not New York. We don't have the taxes here that they have in New York. You know, folks, you get what you pay for. There are just not too many free lunches out there. And so we operate on the business of trying to have a solid business plan. And one of the ways we do that is have our annual car raffle. And this year, the car raffle will be on 27 April, and it'll be held at the American Muscle Car Museum over on Sarno and Wickham Road behind the Greyhound track. The event will start at 6 p.m. We have a lot of people that are buying tickets, making for a donation. You get one ticket for $25, for five tickets for $100. But that's your admission to the museum, to food, everything else, but also a chance to win a car. And a car is made available by Boniface Hires Dealerships, AJ Hires. He's helped us last year. He helped us this year. And I'm sure AJ will continue to help us because he believes in helping people. But we have a Dodge Challenger, a Dodge Ram truck, and a Mazda Miata convertible. The winner will have their choice of one of those three vehicles. Consider this: for $25 or 5 tickets for $100, you get a chance to win a car. You get to see $62 million worth of muscle cars, 250 of them that are in the museum. And I've never heard a person go to the museum, come out, and not say, that's really something to see. So, to get tickets, call us at 321-473-7770. I'll say it again, 321-473-7770, or go to helpingseniorsofbrevard.org. helpingseniorscarraffle.com. helpingseniorscarraffle.com, all one word, and you can get your tickets there. Well, that's enough of my commercialism, but Bill's got a bunch of things he wants to talk about. I'd like to ask Bill, several things are happening. For those of you that have been following the president's budget, in the president's budget, he has reduced the amount of money that the federal government will contribute to a program called SHINE, Serving the Health Insurance Needs of Florida's Elders. He's recommending that $13 million be cut out of that program. Example of how $13 million is important, there are only something like $50 million in the whole program, $1 million for each state, roughly. And, to me, if that program went away or were greatly impacted, all of you that have used SHINE services over the years know the impact of trying to navigate the insurance system by yourself. Medical, house, everything else, personal insurance. These SHINE advisors work free. They're volunteers. So think about this for a minute. We don't have taxes that pay for this stuff. We don't want to increase our taxes at a local level. But think about this, folks. If, and I say if, our county commissioners would put $15,000 out of a $1.1 billion budget in place to fund that program for SHINE here in Brevard County, Florida, we'd have it for years to come at a cost of $15,000. That's just an example of why it's important for all of us to understand what happens on the national level, how it affects us on the state level. Another is the inability of the House and the Senate in the state of Florida and at the national level to work together. Right now, there's a $2 billion difference between the Democrats and the or the House. No, I don't want to say Democrats. I want to say House and Senate in the state of Florida for funding the Community Care for the Elderly program. And last year, you and I had a show and we talked about 65,000 people, Bill, needing help because they couldn't perform activities of daily living. And they needed help to stay in their homes, needed help to live. This year, a $35 million cut has been proposed in a system that has, as I read the legislation this morning, 64,000 people still needing help provided through Community Care for the Elderly for these programs, reduction of respite programs, reduction of programs through Aging Matters, and a lot of people will be hurt, and a $35 million difference or amount and a $2 billion difference. I just don't understand it. We're not gaining on a number of people that need help, Bill.
I agree, and the number's growing.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, we're not getting less people, we're getting more people.
There are more people in Florida that are coming here expecting to get the same benefits they're getting in states like Minnesota or New Jersey or New York, high income states, high tax states that tax the people to provide these some of these I guess voucher programs that pay for certain things that we certainly don't do here in Florida. We
Correct.
just don't do them. And people are coming here in increasing numbers expecting to be able to get these programs. And I've told a story on this station. I've had, I can think of right now, at least two women, that one lived in New York, one lived in New Jersey and Chicago, and they had $750 a month income, and they wanted to come move here to Brevard County so they could have a better way of life. And I told them, I said, you can't even get housing here for $800. I said, there is no available housing, HUD housing. We just don't have it. We have some, but we don't have enough to take care of the needs of all the people. And somehow, Bill, I think our legislators, when we go through the bills like you and I are talking about today, our legislators are really, truly not aware, or if they are aware of some of the real needs that need to be addressed in the state of Florida, because we're the second or third largest state in the United States in terms of the numbers of elderly, and we've got some horrible programs that simply don't help seniors. And I'm not an advocate of giving the stuff away free, but as I get more involved with this, as I listen to what some of the callers to our organization express, I express to my board, I say, how do we go about trying to help people resolve some of the situations they have? How do we help people find a place to live?
Well, Joe, Bloomberg just ran an article, I think it was on the 26th of March, that half of people over 55 do not have any sort of retirement savings.
I know, Bill.
I mean, this is going to be a big, big problem in the years coming up.
I have people that actually call me and say, Joe, what should I do? I want to remain living where I am, and some of them are in fairly nice retirement communities. But some of the retirement communities have told the people who live in their community that there will be annual increases in the cost because they have to maintain their margin of profit. And when you start thinking about it, people that are in their 80s that are living on fixed incomes, let's say fixed incomes of $3,500 a month, and they start increasing the cost of the place they're living in, they quickly bump that up to where their assets are going to be gone. And you try to do the math and try to, people call me for help, and at times I don't know who to send them to who is really honest in helping people develop a plan. Because let's say a person in their 80s that has assets of, say, $50,000 in the bank, and they have a fixed income of $3,500 or $3,600 a month, and they're told there are going to be increases where they're living, and they know that they're not going to be increased in their cost of living because it's not going to go up to meet that kind of that increase. They're gamble, and like when I talk to them, and I say, well, you got to take. If you have $50,000 and you try to hold back on how much you're spending extra per month, you may be able to make that last 6, 7, 8, 9, or 10 years. It depends on how fast you deplete it. And that's the end. You got to gamble. When are you going to die? And if you outlive, I think the only saving grace is that if you outlive your money, people are going to be in some place to live, but they may not like it.
Well, the problem is also, I just read an article, not to be the bearer of bad news, but there, I think something like 40% of people have refused medical treatment or getting a prescription pill filled because they can't afford it.
I read the same thing, Bill.
Yeah,
I read that too.
Yeah.
It's
and then that just increases the burden on the hospitals.
Yeah. But it also goes back to a community like here in Brevard County, Florida, where we have I won't say a large number of wealthy people, and I'm not saying that wealthy people are the ones that should be expected to carry the burden, but I think our taxes are low. I would not be adverse to paying a little bit more in taxes if I knew that tax was going to be shared by all the citizens, and the way the system works is that those that are low on a totem pole, we're not going to pay as much in taxes as the ones high on the totem pole, but it's sort of balance out and make people be able to share the burden a little bit.
I agree.
Okay. You know, at times, Bill, I just feel like I'm preaching to the choir because I get these problems in phone calls. Monday, I had 13 calls on our hotline about people needing help. And some we can refer to places, others we cannot. We do the best we can. Let's go ahead and talk about your bills and see if I...
Okay, I got a few more. We had a bill that dealt with banking. Sometimes when somebody passes away, they have these small accounts that are only in their name, and they don't have any joint owner or beneficiary on them. And that's kind of problematic because it means usually we have to open up some sort of probate. And a lot of times the probate is more costly than the amount of money in the bank account or close there too. So they were developing or coming up or trying to come up with a system whereby we could have a way to move money to certain persons after a period of time. The problem is, of course, if you put that in a statute and then somebody, has a will later and it says, hey, this money's supposed to go to Joe and statute says it goes to Beth, then, you kind of thwarted the person's intent of their will.
Well, of course, it should go to Joe.
Yeah, so... there were some problems with that. They've been trying to work that out, and maybe the compromise is letting the money go to unclaimed property. The bankers kind of want to get these small accounts closed because they just seem to languish there forever and ever. There was also a bill dealing with security dealers. Security dealers wanted to be able to freeze somebody's account if they suspected there was exploitation going on. That sounds great until you realize, what if they do it and they're wrong? And you're trying to get your money out of your account and they're not letting you get to your money. So there's some problems with that. They are trying to work that out. I just heard there was some sort of compromise that may have been reached on that. I'm not sure what that compromise is. But there has to be something there that just doesn't give them the unilateral authority to go around freezing people's accounts with no repercussions if they were not justified in doing so.
How do we manage to continually find little glitches and little things like this in the law? It has to be tweaked every year.
Well, usually some industry has a problem and they want it resolved, or there is some, like I said, legal case that brings this, the problem to the forefront. One of these, this is a good example, is in Florida, Medicaid used to pay unreimbursed medical expenses back 90 days. So if you were in a nursing home and say you applied for Medicaid, Medicaid could actually go back 90 days and pay, as long as you were eligible for Medicaid in those prior 90 days, they could go back 90 days and pay bills that were prior to you getting approved that had not been paid. The legislature last year wanted to change that because they wanted a cost savings, and it was supposed to go to a 30-day retroactive where they could go back 30 days and pay unreimbursed medical expenses. Well, somehow in the budget that got all mixed up, and instead it went back to the first day of the month in which you apply. So if I had applied or on like February 28th, they would go back to February 1st and cover any unreimbursed medical expenses. But if I had applied on February 3rd, they would only go back to February 1st too, which means they would only cover 2 days of unreimbursed medical expenses. So they're trying to work on the budget right now to make it a true 30-day, which is what I believe all the legislators believe they had passed last year. And they're trying to go back and fix that problem. This is really big for the healthcare industry, because you can imagine if somebody goes from a hospital to a nursing home and the hospital bill hasn't been paid yet, you want them to be able to go back at least 30 days so Medicaid can pay the hospital for the costs of the hospitalization. Of course, most of us all wanted it to go back to 90 days back, because that helps all our facilities, nursing homes and hospitals.
Yeah, when you get into business and talk about this, so yeah, I have heard it stated, and I maybe you know the answer to this. I've always heard it stated that if a person is in the hospital cannot discharge you unless you have a safe place to go.
Correct.
What happens if a person goes into a hospital, I'm talking about in their 70s or 80s, and they have no
safe place to go?
Right.
Well, usually what happens is they will get discharged to a skilled nursing facility, if that's the appropriate level of care, because the skilled nursing facility can immediately apply for Medicaid to cover the costs of that. And while they're at a skilled nursing facility, we know they're safe.
Okay. Well, wait a minute. You're saying because the person's at a skilled nursing facility, they're safe?
Well, in theory, yes.
Yeah, you just opened up another big bag of worms.
In theory.
Yeah.
But that's usually what happens if they're at a hospital and the hospital has done all they can as far as treatment goes, and they're ready to be discharged, and we can't discharge them home because there's nobody there to care for them. Usually they will discharge into a nursing home, either for rehab or for long-term care. But it gets a little trickier now with only a 30-day retroactive window, because the nursing home has to be sure when they are accepting these people in that they're going to get paid. And that's where this 30 days really becomes tricky.
What would happen, Bill, if all the people that would call our hotline that had no place to live or were going to be forced to live on the streets, or sleep in their car, and we're talking about 70 and 80-year-old people. If I said, hey, look, you could go to the hospital and get in the hospital, and you're going to be taken care of somehow in the system.
Well, usually you would have to be admitted into the hospital for some sort of medical condition.
Bill, I think
they're not going to take everybody, and in fact, they keep a lot of people in observation status.
I'll bet you most of the people that call me, some of the stories I hear are so sad and so screwed up that you could almost advise them. I'm not saying I'm going to do this, but I could almost advise them on a way they could get into the hospital, and the hospital would take them.
Right.
It's sad. It's sad that our system has fallen to that.
That the last resort is the emergency room. Yes.
Yep.
I agree with you.
Do you have anything else you want to tell on this?
I just wanted to mention one other thing. Florida Statute 744 deals with guardianship in the state of Florida. There has been a proposed total rewrite of that statute that is out and floating about. It won't be this legislative session, but it'll be next. And we will be, hearing a lot more about that next year.
Boy, we have a lot to think about, don't we?
Yes, we do, Joe.
Somehow, maybe I got to talk you into writing one of my columns for the paper sometime, so we could, if I could get you to write kind of column that I would want you to write, but I'm not sure you'd do it in danger of your law practice. Folks, I'm getting the circle your wagon signal, and that means that it's time to call it adios for today, and I'm not going to practice my Spanish on you, but I'll thank you for listening to us, and I'll thank Bill for being our sponsor, thank him for the very, very, very informative update on our legislation process that's going on in Tallahassee now. Pay attention to what you read in the paper and what you hear on the radio, folks. It's real. It's happening. Thank you. We'll see you here next week. Bye-bye.